Hi, I'm Jude Matulich-Hall, and this is a special edition of Titles, Talk, and Tipples. We're going international to Godalming, England with the Godalming Writers Group. In the group is Alan Barker, David Young, Elif Tyson, Ian Honeysett, Paul Rennie, Pauline North, Martyn Adams, Christine Butler, Heather Wright, and Helen Favell. With us this evening is Martyn Adams, Alan Barker, and Pauline North thus far. Welcome, Godalming.
Hello there.
So to kick it off, how about Martyn Adams? Tell me about the Godalming group.
Right, I'm one of the original members of the Godalming group, and we started, I think it was in 2015, give or take, and we all decided to get together because there wasn't a local writers group as such. So we decided to get together and form one. And then after a bit of discussion, of course, we realised that there's not really an outlet for writers, particularly short stories. So we decided to form the group and then go ahead and start publishing anthologies locally ourselves.
Wonderful. That's great. It looks like we have David Young joining us.
Well, actually, I'm writing under the name David Lowther because, rather like Martyn, there's a David Young that writes spy stories, and I don't wish to be confused with him. So
Okay.
in the Godalming Writers' Tales, I'm known as David Lowther. Otherwise, I'm notorious as David Young.
What are each of you tippling on this evening?
I'm actually tippling on a nice pint of real ale, and it's a regular tipple of mine, either in my house or 150 yards up the road in the pub. Nice. So I'm by no means a heavy drinker, but that I do drink, I love, including tonight.
Yes.
Which I've been looking forward to all day.
All right. So, Pauline, what are you tippling on this evening?
Tonight, I've got a nice glass of gin and tonic.
Mm. Do you do anything special, or is it just the straight gin and tonic?
Straight gin and tonic. I don't like lemon in it. It spoils the flavour, and I can't stand ice in it because it waters it down.
Yeah.
How about you, Alan? What are you tippling on this evening?
I'm tippling on good old-fashioned water, Jude.
Very good. Well, I have some of that too. I always have water at my hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the nectar of life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes down easily after a proper dinner, which I had only an hour and a half ago. So, yeah, that's fine. But that's good enough for me. A bit boring, but good enough for me.
That's quite all right. Martyn, what are you partaking in?
I'm boring, really. I'm just going to have a cup of coffee.
Okay.
Coffee. I'm not a great alcohol fanatic, so. Oh,
that's all right. Yeah, so it's almost 9 o'clock your time. Is it decaf, or do you just not have a problem drinking?
No. I have a very serious problem with caffeinated. No, it's definitely decaf. Yeah.
Okay.
Supermarket.
Yeah, I can't drink coffee past a certain hour. I won't sleep. So yeah. And I'm drinking some Pinot Gris. All right, so let's cheers.
Yes.
Cheers.
You have 3 volumes of the Godalming Tales, which each of you have many stories in. And I'd like to hear about a more general thing of what your genres are.
Yeah, I tend to write, well, what I think is humorous or light-hearted works, but the genre can vary. So I'm doing a fantasy series, if you like, short stories with teddy bears, which I'm collating into a book later on, an illustrated book later on, and some humorous shorts that I've put in, particularly in book 1 and 2. Called The Unfamous Residents, which are a little bit surreal, I think, in some places. And apart from that, one or two other, sci-fi, slightly offbeat stories.
Mm-hmm. So I know the answer to this, but for the audience, I wanted to ask. So are your teddy bear stories for children?
Not really, no. There are one or two adult references. So, these teddy bears, they live local under, or near a bowling green. We have one of these bowling greens at Godalming. They live quite close to there, near by the river. And they make their money, or biscuits, actually, they trade in. One of them does betting things, and then he starts distilling beetroot, which is a particular thing. And and one of the bears discovers a dildo of all things. And of course, these things are not quite appropriate for children. So sort of children's stories meant for adults rather than...
Great. All right. So how about you, Alan? What's your genre? Tell us a little bit about some of your stories.
Okay, Jude. Well, I like particularly the murder mysteries, that sort of thing. But also I have got involved over the last couple of years of writing feel-good stories as well, because there is quite a reasonable market over here in the UK for feel-good stories. So that's where I've been trying to place my stories, as well as the Godalming anthologies, of course. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of a mixture. I also, for instance, wrote a story about a storm and what happened to a guy in a storm, which was somewhere in the middle of feel good and murder mystery, but somewhere in between. But really, I like to experiment and whatever occurs to me, Jude, I think is the answer. But murder mysteries particularly. I think if I do start writing novels, I think I'll go in that direction.
Yeah, I really love murder mysteries. I mean, my husband and I, we watch murder mysteries all the time. I'm a huge Agatha Christie fan. I've read almost all of her books, So, yes, very much so. And do your stories, are they based in like a reality type setting, or do you dabble in fantastical magic, anything like that? Or is it just straight?
No, I don't do fantastical. They're not very fantastic at all, to be honest. But I just keep it more or less on the lines of Agatha Christie, possibly, and John Dixon Carr's another mystery writer I enjoy very much. I don't know if you know of him, but they go back to the golden age, obviously the middle of the last century, really. Okay. I like a lot of the writers in that era. But anything to do with a murder mystery is good for me.
Very good. Is there humor, or are they serious? I mean, murder is serious, right? But as we've experienced with Agatha Christie, kind of has some humor. There's been a couple others that keep some humor in it.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, actually, Jude, because there's a lot of writers these days who do incorporate humor into their murder mysteries. I think it's easier to do that in a novel rather than in a short story. I think with short stories, you've got to be much more to the point. And if it's dark, or it's there's murders, or in, for instance, another story of mine, blackmail, particularly, it's hard to introduce humour into a short story, I think, but when that's the genre, in my opinion. I mean, sometimes I wonder whether it actually works, having humour in a darker story. But as I say, I think you can. It's nice sometimes to be able to do that in a full-length novel, because it just lightens the mood for a little bit before you then get pulled up in the seriousness of the story again.
Sure, yeah, that makes sense. And David, how about you?
I didn't contribute to the first volume. I wasn't living here at the time. And I did make a small contribution to the second. Now, if I was forced to say, what are you dabbling in? I suspect I'd say I'm dabbling in things that matter, that people treat without a great deal of seriousness. So, for example, in the first, Godalming Tales 2, I wrote a story about a man from the north of England who inherited a lot of money in a house in the south of England, actually in Godalming. Oh. Now, we're talking here about two entirely different cultures.
Sure.
And in, I did actually sit on a bus and I heard somebody say, this is in Godalming, say, have you ever been to the north? And this woman said, good heavens, no. So I leant forward, I said, madam, you should go. And she said, why? I said, you can see the caves that they live in up there. And then I shut up. So I wrote a funny story about that, which seemed to go down well. Now, for the next volume, I cheated slightly because I've had 3 novels published, all of which have dealt with the beginning, or sort of the time before, during the Second World War. And in Godalming, not very far from where we are now, is the headquarters, or was the headquarters, of one of our most secret establishments called the Special Operations Executive at a place called Wanborough Manor. So I wrote a story based on Wanborough Manor, which I hadn't included in my novels. I'd mentioned Wanborough Manor in the 4th novel, but it was a fairly gruesome story. But really, it was to say you'd be surprised what happened in Godalming during the war. In this area, being in the southeast, we were very close to continental Europe, so much happened down here prior to D-Day and so forth. So anyway, that was the set. And then the third novel, the third set of books, I've written 2 stories for, both dealing with issues. One I tried to make subtle. It's about incompetence. A woman who orders a bathroom and it all goes wrong. He delivers a kitchen instead. The idea being that lots of things in this country are incompetent, rather like our government. But I didn't say that in the story.
So, David, I'm in the U.S., just, if you haven't figured that out yet. So very familiar.
Right, fair enough. Well, I didn't mention it, but I let people draw their own conclusions. My second story is about climate change.
Oh.
There's a village, it's in the Surrey Hills, because we're moving outwards from Godalming into embrace stories from the Surrey Hills. A village near here proudly calls itself the largest village in England. Well, it's been reinvented in 2025 as the largest green village in England. So the changes that may happen and how they affect one family who moved from the East End of London, having made a fortune in scrap metal or second-hand cars or something, to live in Godalming, how it changes their outlook on life. So I've really tried to deal with issues. Yeah. And to me, that's the most important one that we're facing at the moment. But I still made it as light-hearted as I could. It was fun, and I tried to. There are very few characters, of course, in short stories. There's not really. So I made each have their own foibles and so forth. I think I like that. That's my favourite so far.
That's great. Yeah, that's wonderful. Wow. So you really you have a very broad outlook on things, and I just want to say, the whole environmental thing is very dear to my heart, as it should be to everyone's heart, right? We're all here. So my novel coming out, it's similar. Mine's based on climate change, but there's that humor in it too, to kind of lighten things up. But and it's really funny that you mentioned the North versus South. Basically, my husband and I, we were watching a bit of Fry and Laurie last night. And there was this great skit about one of them was from the North and one of them was from Yorkshire and the other was from London, I think. And just like, they're talking and the Northerner is getting in the other's face and really loud and kind of not very, not coming across very intelligent at all. But then it becomes a competition of what's in the North and what's in the South. And it's like, what do you, and I even think one of the lines was, we don't live in caves.
Oh, right. I touched all that subconsciously. Yeah. But, it is a big issue in this country. And in fact, there was a legendary Monty Python sketch where some Yorkshiremen are sitting around saying, I were born under the bridge on the M6. And it's exceptionally funny. And it is an issue. And it was a big issue in our recent general election because some of the Northerners actually voted for the Tories. Nobody. So this has caused a bit of hassle in Britain. Anyhow, yeah, the North-South thing is fun. But it is quite serious as well.
It is serious. Oh, okay. So it's, I like the humor parts, and at least, but it seems like it's one of those things that just it's been an issue for a long time because
I joined at the same time as Dave did. Funnily enough, on exactly the same day. We happened to be looking for the group on the same day. And I like to use writing the short stories for these anthologies as an experimental way of using different genres. So I try different things out. The first one I did, which was in Godalming Tales 2, was where a young woman meets the ghost of Jack Phillips. And I don't know whether Americans are aware, but Jack Phillips was the senior radio operator on the Titanic.
Oh, okay.
So the local pub that we use a lot there, where we used to have our meetings, is the Jack Phillips pub.
Oh.
And there's a memorial down by the river, which is dedicated as a Jack Phillips memorial. Well, she's sitting down there on a foggy evening, mourning the fact that a relationship's just gone west, and this young man walks out of the mist and sits and talks with her and tells her that he's Jack Phillips. So they discuss the going down of the Titanic and how his co-radio operator was saved, but he wasn't. And that was a little bit of experiment with a little bit of ghost story.
Yeah.
I also did a bit of a social history on one, because so many people assume that Godalming is full of middle class and upper people who have plenty of money, drive the big cars, or
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote a little story about my husband when he was a young boy and what Godalming was like then, about how he'd take a cart down to the sawmill of a Saturday morning and collect offcuts of firewood, and then across to where the coal yard was and pick up a sack of coal and pull his cart home for his mother's fire. So a very different sort of story outlook to what a lot of people see as Godalming.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from that, I like to write murder stories. There's a story in the second book, Godalming Tales 2, where I have an assassin come down and spend a couple of days casing out Godalming and observing this flat where this person has to be dealt with. And then when this second person comes in that he's expecting, he goes in, shoots them both.
Oh.
And then you find out later that the one was a professor at the university, a Russian professor, and the other was a leading light in a terrorist organisation. So he was sent by the government to... But what we find out right at the end is that the government want to dispose of him as soon as he's finished and are planning to get rid of him as soon as he's done this job. He finds out about it and disappears. He's off to pastures new. Like Helen, I've started writing little bit feel-good stories as well. I wrote one for 3 that was about getting on for an elderly couple. She's been widowed and she's lost and lonely and sits in a cafe. And the man is a predatory creature who's looking for his next victim because he makes a business, a career, a life out of picking a vulnerable woman and being a parasite on them for a while. So he selects this particular woman. And the trouble is he falls in love with her and it turns out to be a nice little love story. So,
That was a particularly good...
What's that, David say?
That was a particularly good story.
Thank you, David.
I like that very much indeed. You just reminded me about it. I'll tweet about it tomorrow.
Recently bought all of the Godalming tales for my Kindle, so I'll be working through those for sure. And, you know, I have to say that I really envy anybody who writes mystery. You know, I deal with satire, gothic, almost horror, gothic horror, not horror, but, you know, gothic horror, just dark, dreadful kind of little stories. I like that stuff. And, but mystery is always, I mean, one day maybe I will be able to, but sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my brain around mystery because it's really challenging to me you want to give the reader enough clues to, you know, carry them along, but you don't want them to figure out, you know, the answer right away. I guess some people are really good at mysteries and they can figure out who the culprit was right away. But, you know, the red herring and just, you know, giving just enough, but not too much, you know, that's always very intriguing to me. So for you mystery writers, how do you go about that? I mean, without giving away all your secrets and, but do you have some pointers for writing mystery?
I don't like mysteries, so
Mine aren't so much mysteries. They tend, the books that I write that involve murder and danger, and they tend to be where the first one is where a woman accidentally happens to see a murder. So she knows right from the start who this murder is because she witnessed it. And the book involves avoiding being killed by him because he knows that she's seen it and he's after her. And the repercussions and the involvements that go from there. So there's not a mystery as such. So I think that's more Alan's field than any of ours.
Yeah. Really. So I guess like crime and suspense can go along with mystery, but it's not necessarily the same. So, Alan, how do you go about it?
Well, I suppose one of the things they always say that is to include clues, but try and include them in such a way as they don't appear to be clues. So the writing in a way has got to be seamless. It's just the clues are sort of brought in, but they're not sort of thrust in front of the reader's face. They're just sort of slipped in somehow or another. And that's the sort of, it's not easy, but if you can slip them in without anyone noticing particularly, you can then refer back to them when you sort of giving the summary of what happened at the end of the story. It is you're right, it is a big challenge. And Agatha Christie had it to a T. Some of her fantastic. One thing I do find amazing, Jude, is that some mystery writers actually, you know, this thing about plotters versus pantsers. Oh
yes, yeah.
How do pantsers actually do it? I can understand it in other genres, but in murder mysteries, I think they've got to be well plotted out.
Oh yeah, I would think so, because I don't know. Pantsers, I could see how that could work with fantasy or, well, not even sci-fi though, because sci-fi is a lot more strict with rules. With fantasy, you can get away with a lot. I could not see not planning or a mystery and making sure that all the pieces fit before putting it down. I write fantasy, and even with fantasy, I've backed myself into corners and have had to change, you know, rules and things like that. So I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, I get monthly newsletters from an author called Robert Crouch, who lives not far away in Sussex on the south coast, and he's written 7 murder mystery novels, and he says every one of his novels he's written is from the seat of his pants, and he starts. He starts off with an idea. He used to be an environmental officer, so he used to get involved in situations which were having to tell people you shouldn't be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that. And there were crimes on the periphery which the police would always deal with. He obviously never got involved, but he was on the periphery, and so he did get to hear this is what brought him some ideas into his stories. But all his stories, he comes up with an idea about what it could be about, and then he says, "Oh, right," and then I've got about 80% of the way through the story, and then I had to solve it myself. I thought, what?
Wow.
How can you do that?
That's kind of great, but it's, writing is such a strange phenomenon in some ways because,
aren't we? Yeah.
We talk about characters taking on a life of their own and not cooperating, which to a non-writer, they don't get that. They're just like, well, you're the writer. You write what you want the character to do. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like sometimes they don't cooperate. So, I mean, I could see like that's one of those strange phenomenons is he can write 80% of the story, not even knowing what the conclusion is going to be. And then so it's just as exciting for him to figure out who the culprit is as it is for the reader.
Does he go back at the end, Alan, and slip the clues? Think I'll go back and slip a clue, and it's at chapter such and such, because then it can relate to this, and then it can relate to that.
Yeah.
That might work for a pantser, mightn't it?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I do things like that sometimes. I think, oh, now why couldn't that have happened? So I'll go back and alter something.
Yeah.
And then have it come back and relate later on.
Yeah,
I like to have strains going that come back and relate to each other.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Much later in the story.
Yes, you've got to have the spine of the story, but outside of that, you can always just adjust it to suit yourself and to suit the conclusion. Yeah, absolutely.
So we've been talking short stories. David touched on he's written 3 novels. So I know all of you have written short stories. I know David has written novels. I know Martyn has written novels. And I think, Pauline, you've written.
Yeah, I've got 3 published.
3. Okay. So what about you, Alan? Do you write? Have you written novels? You spoke about it, but.
I wrote a few novels when I was a teenager.
Oh, nice.
A long time ago. And I sent them off for publication. And needless to say, they all got rejected. And then I thought, oh, stop this. I'm not getting out with my mates at all. So I gave up the writing for a long time. And obviously then I was in a career of my own. And it just, the two just, I wanted to go back to writing, but the two just didn't go together, my career and writing. I wouldn't have had enough brain space, if you like, to write.
Oh, yeah. I get that.
Took early retirement 3 years ago, and that's when I went on creative writing classes and started writing short stories and see where it takes me. But yes, I would like to start writing novels at some point, but I just don't want to rush into it.
Sure. Is there any possibility that you'll revamp the ones you wrote when you were younger?
Well, that's a good question. My stepdaughter suggested I do that. It is an awful long time ago. I'd have to go read them again, I think. Sure. I think I probably want to do something fresh, to be honest, something new.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. I've gone back and read some stuff I wrote when I was younger, and it's like, ouch. Which it's pretty common, I think. We evolve, and so hopefully our writing evolves too, right?
I think that applies now. I mean, I go back and read, and there are things I think, oh, I could have done that better. I could have rephrased that, or that was wrong. I think that always happens, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. That's what
I went through I have a novel coming out in a month. It was supposed to go out in August, but there were some issues. So it's actually coming out the first week of October. And my publisher gave me permission to look at it one more time. And I was like, no, I'm just going to look at this one character. I'm just going to change the way this one character is presented because it was too close to Terry Pratchett character. So I was recognizing that my characters was way too close to one of his characters. So I wanted to change it up a bit. And luckily, this character only had a few lines, and so I just needed to change a little bit. And he said, "Go ahead, and you have one more chance to look at the whole thing." And I was like, "No. I know what's going to happen if I start looking at the whole thing. I'm going to start changing things." It's like it doesn't matter how many times you go over short story or novel. You're always going to find something that could be worded better. Yeah. So there's got to be a place where we stop.
Yeah.
So with that, like how do you guys go about, I know this is an individual question for everybody, but how do you go about your editing process with your stories? And yeah, and how often do you go over a story? Is it several times, or are you just someone that can go over a story once? How often do you rewrite?
My process is to write it down like a stream as much as you can. I mean, there is a bit of going back and checking spelling and whatnot, because Word has a propensity to come in and say, "Oh, you need a comma here," or you need a semicolon there, or whatever. And once I've done that, then I reread it probably as many as 5 times, 5 or 6 times, whatever. And then I try and get a third party to look at it. I didn't do that for my shorts in the Godalming Tales series 1 and 2, because I was just starting as a short story writer then. But I then acquired an editor and put some money her way. Sadly, she's more interested in singing and whatnot, so she's wandered off. But I'm rather pleased to say that Alan's volunteered to take a look at my work.
Oh, very nice.
So done some qualifications or some work on that side of things, which is really good. So I've decided to start again and put everything in Alan's direction and see how things work with that. I mean, Alan and I are working together on that side of things. So at the moment, from my point of view, it's looking quite promising. Alan's going to go through all of the Frisch's Gang stories. I'm not going to touch any of the other stuff this time I've published in the short box. And then hopefully, I'm working on a steampunk trilogy at the moment as well. And at some stage, hopefully, I can convince Alan to enjoy a steampunk fantasy novel. Lots of gore, violence, and mayhem in it. And with any luck with that, we'll end up having that edited as well. Yeah. So at the moment, it's a bit incestuous. I'm doing the editing in-house effectively. Yeah.
I had someone, my novel is somewhat steampunk. I mean, it's not, it's subtle. The steampunk elements are subtle, but they're definitely there. It is a fantastical world. But I had one of my first beta readers. She does not read fiction, and she was actually one of my best beta readers. So, yeah, she was able to suspend her. And that was the wonderful thing, was like, she normally wouldn't pick up and read anything like that, but she enjoyed it. So that meant a lot to me. But she was also able to come at it, not understanding steampunk. And so she was really able to help me stay grounded so that it felt real throughout the story. So it could be a very good match, right? It's having someone that's not into fantasy writing, reading a fantasy or editing a fantasy novel.
Yeah, I have to say with my steampunk, I don't like to deviate from reality too far. Mm-hmm. So I've tried to keep it as grounded in reality as far as I can. So the Zeppelins and whatnot are absolutely huge, and they use a mixture of hydrogen and helium for safety reasons. So, and I actually discovered that there was actually a very fast and powerful car built in the 1920s, which was faster than petrol-driven cars. And it was powered by steam. And that I found quite surprising. And I've incorporated that, or further development of that technology, into my books. So I've tried to keep it pretty grounded, although it is still fundamentally steam.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, great. So, Alan, are you excited about taking this on?
Yeah, very excited. I've already provided an edit, a proofreading and copy editing for Martyn for the first story. It always helps if you enjoy reading the stories, and Martyn's teddy bear stories are always enjoyable. And yes, very much so. I love proofreading. My wife suggested I take the course last year, and I wouldn't have thought of it personally, me being me. But I took the course, fantastic course, and it took me about 4 or 5 months to complete. And so now I've got the opportunity to proofread other people's work, which is a great opportunity, really. And so, yes, thoroughly enjoy it. Whereas the others in the group are very good at marketing, and Martyn particularly good on IT, where those sort of things I'm pretty rubbish at. So it's to have something that I can do that's of some use to the group, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so do you edit your own work, or do you pass it on to someone else?
Well, I do edit my own work, yes. So with the first, I get it written down as fast as I reasonably can.
Oh, yeah.
I don't read too much about the state of it, and then I go back over it several times. I don't know how many times, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
But yes, I do have, my wife is a very good beta reader, and my sister is as well. And and then I have a few other friends, but I wouldn't call them beta readers. They just read my stories for enjoyment or otherwise.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I'm trying to do the same thing. My first novel, I edited as I went along, and that took forever to finish the story. So with my second novel, I'm taking it. I just write it out as quickly as possible, get those ideas out there, and don't worry too much about, the state of it. And it's a wreck. I mean, but it's, of course the story's still there, but like grammar wise and spelling wise, it's kind of a mess, but those things are pretty easy to fix.
Yeah, I don't think it matters really, Jude. My opinion, it doesn't really matter how bad the first draft is. But when you start editing your first draft, you sometimes lose track what's you need to write further on down.
Yeah, I found that too. And there's I think the rule of any professional writer, I know Terry Pratchett said nobody is to ever see your first draft. That first draft is for you and you alone. And I think Stephen King said something similar. And I'm sure across many genres, it's the same thing. So, of course, that first draft is for your eyes only. And then from there, and for me, it's I like to do in 2 or 3 go-throughs before I actually let my first beta reader, and my first beta reader is my husband, so he's really good at it. It's
good to have someone close to you doing that, because they're more likely to be very honest, aren't they?
Yes, yeah, and I there's definitely no worry about him being too nice and saying this is wonderful if it's not, and luckily, we like similar things. So, but yeah, the honesty is really great. And when it's coming from someone that's close to you and cares for you, it comes out nice, but it comes out really truthful at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah, which is, you can't ask for more than that, can you?
Right. So David, I'm sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
I'm just looking for a wife, aren't I? I need it. Helen, will you marry me?
David. David, how about you? What does your editing process look like?
Well, it's evolved over the years. The first novel I wrote, I made copies and handed them round to various people who made comments. Then, and I tend to agree with Stephen King. Your first draft is for you only. And the second is probably the one that you start passing about. Yeah. So I did that. That worked okay. Of course, I have a publisher who had an editor who was useless.
Oh, yeah.
That didn't help.
Yeah.
That didn't help me at all. And that, for the first 3 novels, I put up with that. And then for this novel, I've appointed an outside editor, a very, very experienced editor. And when I'd done the second draft, I sent it to her, and she wrote me a 26-page report. She really took her job seriously. And her name's Debbie Martyn. She writes very dark thrillers, but despite that, she's an extremely pleasant person. But I mean, they are dark. Anyhow, and she said, well, she wrote this report, and then we had a Skype conversation, which went on for about 2 hours. And the first thing she said, you can sometimes bake a cake and do it badly. This has got all the ingredients of a prize-winning cake, but it's no good. It's not been put together properly. Yeah. And I really respected that. And I'm currently working on a rewrite, which I'm about 2/3 of the way through.
Oh, very nice.
I hope to get it finished by the end of next month. However, back to the short stories. While you were away putting dimes in the meter or whatever you were doing, we were discussing our meetings. Now, we've been, like everybody else, thrown into chaos by the pandemic. I mean, we started, before the pandemic, we started inviting anybody interested to come along on a Monday evening once a fortnight and help us evaluate the stories, the submissions we were getting. And then we would perhaps send them back and make some suggestions. And we haven't done that recently, but we were discussing, now that things have eased a little bit, we were discussing, we did all our meetings via Zoom. And then we started talking about all sorts of daft things and doing business as well. How to market the books and so on. We're going back to our 2-meeting strategy. I think Martyn, will back me up, and Pauline were discussing that earlier, whereby we have a business meeting. How do we market the book? How blah, blah, blah. Once a month. And then once a fortnight, I think we agree, we're going to have an evaluation meeting, a writer's circle, I think Martyn calls it. And I think that's a very good way. And we will evaluate the submissions. And if necessary, we will send them back. But this isn't a Big Brother group. This is, anybody is welcome. Whether they choose to come or not is entirely, up to them. But we've got, I suppose, a hardcore of 5 or 6 people. There's 4 of us here tonight, isn't there? Yes. Plus Ian, who can't be here. 5 people, really, who do evaluate the work and edit it and make suggestions, really. And I think that's worked very well. I think that's what we've agreed that we're going to do with our latest group of stories. But it hasn't been easy for us or for anybody else on this planet. Can I just go back to the mystery thing for a minute? Sure, absolutely. One of the things that's fascinated me is that most mysteries are whodunit. And Ernest Hemingway once wrote a novel called The Killers, which opens up in a school classroom and a bloke walks in the door and shoots the teacher dead. And the film is, why, the question there is, why did he do it? It doesn't have to be a whodunit. Why was it done? True. It's often, just as interesting. And that gives sort of variety to that. I mean, nearly every thriller, I'm not talking about the ones that we write, but every writer has got a sort of we find out at the end who's done it and so on and so forth. It doesn't always work well enough. I love we know who's done it, but why the hell is he doing it? And who or she, and who's she working with, and what's the if you like, the backstory that's caused him or her to behave as they did. And that Hemingway really was the first time I ever read something like that. They made it into a very good film, directed by the great Don Siegel in mid-50s. Lee Marvin was the ideal bloke to have march into the classroom and fill the unsuspecting teacher full of lead. Yeah. But it's a different approach. And I think that's what I like about thrillers, is they do have different approaches to being mysteries. So they're still mysteries. Yeah. The fact that you know who's done it doesn't make any less a mystery. It's still, why did he do it, or why did she do it?
Or like, so one of the television shows my husband and I really enjoy is Monk, and it's most of our mystery or crime television shows we watch are British shows. I'm gonna boost your guys' ego a bit. We have found that television series are much more enjoyable when coming from the BBC than a lot of US shows, because you guys know why. The Hollywood big explosions, it's drama and a lot of filler. And so whereas like just for instance, Lewis, you'll get 7 really good episodes, whereas with an American series, you're going to get 20 episodes. And the reason why it's 20 episodes is because a whole lot of filler, where if they took all that filler out, it would probably be 7 really good episodes, right? So
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. But one show we really enjoyed so much that we actually bought the DVDs. They're mysteries too, but a lot of times you see the whodunit right at the beginning. They show you but the mystery is actually, for one, how they went about it, because they always have to have proof, right? That you can't just arrest someone just because they committed the crime. You have to have proof. So the mystery does tend to be like, getting that proof. How did they go about this? Because they might get away with it, but also why? Yeah, so I completely see that too. It doesn't always have to be a whodunit to make a good mystery. So, Pauline, what is your editing process?
I do it myself, and I just read it through and through. I try and concentrate on different aspects. I try and concentrate on this punctuation, the grammar, and then I try to go through again, thinking about the story and the development and who's where, when, and the characterization, all that sort of thing. So I'm probably on 4 or 5 read-throughs. Yeah. And the one I'm doing at the moment is being rather slow because I'm only getting a few pages done a day.
Yeah, I heard part of the conversation that you were getting frustrated with it because you want to get back to the writing, but you're having a hard time with the editing, right?
Yeah, I love the writing part so much, but the editing is so necessary, and I'm not totally confident. I'm professional enough to get it right all the time, so I try to be as careful as possible. So yeah, it's a bit hit and miss, but yeah, I'm dying to get back to writing again.
Well, and that's a really humble outlook of, I've come across a lot of, I'm going to say this very carefully, independent writers that don't have the humility to say to themselves, I'm not perfect with this first draft or even the second draft,
Oh, I acknowledge that absolutely freely.
And they'll just, I've read some stuff that I think the person didn't even go through it twice. I think they wrote it. Maybe they read it once, maybe. And I'm just like, there's no way this person, they just think the idea is such a great idea that the idea is what's going to carry the story. Nope.
I've seen comments on Facebook of, no, don't mess with it. Put your first draft down, and it's what comes from your heart and it comes from your soul, and so it's purity itself. Don't sully it with.
A good reader that's going to stick with you and follow you through, and be the reader that's like they rush out to buy your stories the moment they come out. And they finish them fast and are dying because it's going to be another 6 months to a year before they get to read something else. Those are the kind of readers we want.
Wouldn't that be great?
And I don't know. I myself as a reader, I do not like reading messes. It will drive me crazy. I won't. If I read a writer that has really bad grammar, and I found myself going into editor mode, reading their story. I will not search out more stories. I don't know about you guys, but
I find I notice imperfections.
Mhm.
I mean, even in people I consider to be really, really, really good writers,
Sure.
you sometimes find little things you think, hang on, that's
Yeah.
And I think it just happens. I don't think you can guarantee against all little tiny mistakes.
Sure. Yeah. I
As
just
careful as you can possibly manage to be.
Yeah, I have a newer version of Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I found a little mistake in there. I think the word "the" was repeated twice in a sentence, or something simple like that. So once in a while, it's not a big deal to find a mistake once in a while, but when it's obvious the writer didn't know how to use commas, and they obviously didn't have an editor, that's where it gets annoying for me. Perfection is definitely not the goal, right? Because it's never going to be absolutely perfect. And so I wanted to swing back around to the Godalming stories. You have 3 volumes. Is there a 4th one in the works?
Yes, there is. We're debating at the moment. I mean, we have collated quite a few stories. All the stories in the Godalming books were really on or about Godalming. They had a connection or a link to our town of Godalming. And that was our focus, our market, if you like. We're now wanting to spread out to take in all of the Surrey Hills, which is a designated area of outstanding natural beauty. And, the wild parts are. I'm not terribly sure about some of the built-up areas, but anyway. So we've acquired quite a few stories, again, about Godalming, which will be great for extending the Godalming tales into a 4th book. But at the same time, we have these extra stories coming in about the Surrey Hills, the more local, the more slightly broader area, if you like. And so we're at a debate at the moment whether to make our 4th book, Tales from the Surrey Hills, or Tales from the Godalming, and then come out with a Surrey Hills book later on. But we've certainly collated most of them. I think we're about 80% there. We're ready to go ahead. We need to go and review them, which is one of the things we're going to do with this writers' circle. We started to do it earlier, as David mentioned. I think some of them, kind of need a bit tweaking, or the editing needs to be refined a bit. And we also find that if you read a story out loud yourself,
yes,
about the cadence of a story or the beat or the rhythm of the words as they go forward, sometimes can help the readability. So rather than just reading it in isolation, we think it's best if you read it out loud. Hence another reason for the writers' circles, saying we want to go ahead and proceed with. And then we'll come out with a 4th book. But as I say, at the moment, we're not terribly sure whether it'll be Godalming Tales 4 or Tales from Surrey Hills 1 or whatever.
By the Godalming Writers Group.
From the Godalming Writers.
Why not?
So Pauline and Martyn know this. I so badly want to call you guys the Godalming Gang.
I wrote a short script, a story, or a script, I think, I don't know which book it's in, 1 or 2, about the Godalming gang.
Oh, very nice.
I think it's in 3, Martyn.
Oh, it's in 3, is it?
You're right,
Yeah.
Pauline.
Yeah.
That's a good story, that.
It's fantastic. I love it.
Fabulous. Fun. So
That and the interview one you did in 2, the interview with Mrs. Dollesley.
Oh, yes. Lady
so
Dollesley,
funny.
yeah.
I think I read that one. So with this diverse group of genres as well as abilities, you've got an editor, you've got an IT person, you've got people that are good with marketing and stuff. Is it possible that the Godalming group will evolve to more than a writers group?
Yeah, actually.
That's an interesting thing.
We're toying with the idea of becoming a proper publisher. We know that there's issues really with the publishing. I mean, there are an awful lot of writers out there, and you get onto Amazon Books, there are an awful lot, and I mean, I'm talking millions of books on there. So if you self-publish, it's so easy just to self-publish a book, and then it just gets lost amongst this huge morass of books that are up on the internet now. I think that's kind of unfair. Publishers are also struggling really to make ends meet, and I think I'll be pretty certain that people who go to publishers now will find that and I'm sure your own experiences, Jude, have come across that with they try and do some things very cheaply, very skimpily.
Yeah.
And they like to keep solid control of what they're doing as well all the time. Yeah, so we're looking at the possibility of starting our own little publishing house, if you like, which we can probably publish our works incestuously or whatever, and be a lot more sympathetic to the writers. So we are looking at evolving. I mean, we've certainly evolved over the past few years. Sorry, David.
With that in mind, with the group's blessing, and they knew all along what I was doing, I spent a day or half a day with an author who'd started self-publishing and then thought, hang on a minute, I need to have a proper publisher. So he set up his own company. And he just published his own stuff. Now, the problem we've had is getting self-published books in our booksellers. Yeah. It's a real problem. And even if you can't get them in the booksellers, you can't even get them in the catalogues. So if somebody said, walked into Waterstones, which is the equivalent of your Barnes and Noble, went into Waterstones and said, can you get me a copy of Godalming Tales 2?
Yeah.
No.
Nope.
And that's a real problem. Now, this guy I went to see in St Albans, which is north of London, nice place, he found the same problems, and off he went, set up his own publishing group. Now, all of his books are in, and there are 6 of them, are in Waterstone's catalogue. So if you went in there, you just say, can I have a copy of The Last Nazi? I mean, he writes war crimes books, and they'd look it up and say, yeah, I'll have it to you by Wednesday or whatever. We would like something like that. He has sold, wait for it, 40,000 copies of his books.
Oh my gosh.
Just do it yourself.
Wow.
That's
they are good books.
Yeah.
They are good books, but they're not Frederick Forsyth or anything like that, in terms of espionage thrillers. They are very good. They're very entertaining. He's done a terrific job.
Yeah.
He sold 40,000 copies.
That's a big number. That is a good number of books to sell. And that's a thing here too. And I don't, so you said Waterstone?
Waterstones is the dominant booksellers in the UK. They've taken over Dillon's. There was an American company. What was that one called? It suddenly had hundreds of branches open, then hundreds of branches shut.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think the big catalog here for books is Ingram.
Yeah, I know about Ingram's. Yeah. But there's Blackwell's, of course, which is based at Oxford, and they've spread up, but they're really academic publishers, booksellers rather. But in Godalming, where they've got a section called local interest, our books aren't in there. Right,
because they can't get them from the catalog.
They can't get them from the equivalent of Ingram's.
Yeah, that's a big deal, and that's something that I'm talking with my publisher right now. It's like, first and foremost, and when I started sending my stuff out to a publisher, I got Jeff Herman's Guide to Editing, Publishing, blah, blah, blah. It has a really long title, and one of the things, so I followed his guidelines, and he was like, when you're looking for a publisher, be sure you get a publisher that can get your books into the catalogs that bookstores order books from. Like, that was like one of the things at the top of his list, because if you can't get into a local bookstore in your little town, you may as well self-publish. Because if you don't sell hundreds of thousands of titles, you want your local bookstore to be able to carry your book.
Totally
So,
agree.
that's important.
Yeah, I mean, Godalming Tales not being available in a Godalming Waterstones because it's in the wrong catalogue
Sure.
is daft. It really is.
There are two. We did actually persuade W.H. Smiths. Have you heard of them?
Mm-mm.
Well, not surprised, really.
Yeah.
They're a famous bookshop, but they sell more chocolates as far as I can see. Anyhow, we did get a day where, showcasing local authors, we sat in and chatted with customers, sold copies, signed copies. That was good. But then at the end, we said, well, can you keep some for your shelves? And the answer was no.
Yeah. And I don't know the complete reason for it, but, I just have a feeling it's just really difficult for a business owner to figure percentages and how because percentages go to the author, percentages go here and there and elsewhere. And I just think that they probably have contracts with, my local bookstore, even though it's a small independently owned bookstore, she probably has a contract with Ingram or something that really keeps her hands tied.
She will have.
Yeah.
I mean, that is definitely a difficulty. We keep on trying to overcome. We will do eventually. I know we will.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We're determined that we will. But it is tricky. And the thing that benefits writers today is print on demand.
Oh, yeah. I've heard a lot about that.
Great idea. And you look at one of my books on Amazon and it says only 3 copies left. You think, oh my God, it's selling thousands. Actually, it's not. It sold 10. And there's only 3 left. But they can get them very quickly on the print on demand from the printers. So I think that benefits people like us. But it's only beneficial if you're in the system.
Yes.
And we need to get in the system.
And so, Pauline and Alan, you haven't put your 2 cents in regarding the evolution of the Godalming writers group. I won't say Godalming Gang.
Yeah, I'm thoroughly behind trying to do everything we can to get ourselves on the catalogue list so that we can get into proper bookshops. And I do think that doing our own publishing could be the only way to do it. Mm-hmm. So I'd support that. I think that's a really good idea.
It's fantastic, yeah. Mm. How about you, Alan?
Well, yeah, as I said before, I'm not the most forward thinking when it comes to this sort of thing, so I just help where I can. The one thing I should mention, Jude, is that I'm actually not from Godalming. I'm the one member that isn't in the Godalming area.
You're the black sheep.
That's right.
The party. I'm from Epsom, where they have the Epsom Derby. I don't know if you've heard of that, our fantastic horse race. So that's about 20 odd miles away from Godalming. But I do have history in Godalming, so a place I know very well from my olden days. And so I'm one that's all very interested in going down the Surrey Hills route, expanding our horizon and creating a bigger market for ourselves. Which hopefully, and I'm sure we can do in time. It could be, hopefully, now that the pandemic's, well, it's still there really, but but we're kind of able to do a few more things now, and it's looking good. The future's looking good, I think. Now we're over the worst of it.
Yes, very good. And are you guys gathering in person yet?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, we have done a few times, yeah.
Very good.
I just like to say one thing about Tales from the Surrey Hills. We started a story. Who wrote the first page of that?
Me.
I can't remember. Alan wrote the first page, Then he sent it to me, and I wrote the second. And then I sent it to Pauline.
Elif.
Yeah, I think I was the third. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Elif had it next, and then I took it after Elif.
And I read it out over the phone to a friend of mine who is a short story writer. And I heard this banging. And I said, "What's up?" He said, "I've just fallen on the floor laughing." Because halfway through this, it was a murder mystery set on a foggy day in the Surrey Hills. Halfway through, when he got to Martyn writing the damn thing, he introduced the unusual sight of an inflatable doll into the story. And it took it from being a rather tame thriller into an incredibly funny and stupid tale. And I think that's going to be a great success.
It's absolutely brilliant.
What a great idea.
We're proud of that. We're looking forward to people. Maybe it'll be made into a film. You never know.
Yeah.
That's a new departure in our latest book.
Yeah, that's great. So for the last 3 volumes, people have done separate stories, and you're going to continue doing separate stories.
Oh, yeah.
But with the next volume, you have a story that all of you wrote a page on. That's you're going to have to continue doing that for each volume now.
Oh, we will.
That's great.
It's probably a good idea.
It'll be a good tradition for the Godalming group. Fantastic. Well, the future looks bright for the Godalming Writers Group. I'm looking forward to catching up on the last 3 volumes, and the future volumes will definitely be on my list. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's been great.
Good night.
All right.
Enjoyable.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this conversation,
Please like and subscribe.
Titles, Talk and Tipples.
With Jude Matulich-Hall.